Welcome back, everyone. We're going to carry on hearing evidence from Mr. Clark this afternoon. Mr. Clark, good afternoon. Are you there? Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, I'm here, sir. I can see and hear you.
Good. Thank you very much. And you're ready to carry on, I hope?
I am indeed, yes.
Thank you very much. In that case, Mr. Millett, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clark, I want to backtrack a little bit and just ask you about your access to documents at the BRE before you made your witness statement. And then we'll come back to Kingspan. Can I ask you please to be shown day 95 of your transcript, which was your evidence yesterday? And I'd like to get to page 75 in your evidence there. And at the top of the, in the middle of the page, I was actually asking you questions about the test file. And at line 15, you say, I ask you rather, as you can see, can you explain why you didn't provide copies of the documents from which you got this information when you provided your statement? And that's a reference to paragraphs 148 and 149 about what information you had available to you. And you say at line 18, I believe they are. I'd be very surprised if they're not in there. Everything you had was what was issued to me by the inquiry. Then at line 22, you say, I'm no longer a BRE employee, so I was reliant on what was being sent to me. And then if you go over the page, please, to line 20, you say, and I'm asking you again about documents, you say at line 20, I can't recall, I understood they came from the inquiry, I was issued a packet of stuff maybe, I'm not certain who they came from. And then a little bit over the next page, you say at line 3 and 4, when I'm asking you where you got the documents you used to compile the paragraph in your statement about what documents you had, you say, I thought they'd been disclosed from the inquiry. Then if I can ask you to go on, please, to page 182 of the transcript from yesterday. Page 182, I'd like to show you line 14. Page 182, line 14. The question, can you explain where they were filed or where they were kept, or at least why they weren't on the test file? You say this. No, and one of the things you need to be aware of is that post the fire at the tower, all of the systems that both paper and electronic were locked down at the BRE. So I had no access to any files on any of the systems. So anything that I was given, I was reliant on the BRE to provide me. That was your evidence yesterday. Now, Mr. Clark, we have received today a letter from the BRE's solicitors, Field Fisher, which may be made available to core participants in due course. But I just want to put to you what they say. They say this. First of all, at the time that Mr. Clark prepared his statement, and that was in July 2019, it's right, isn't it, that the BRE was represented by a different firm? Did you know?
I understand they were, yes, that's correct.
And is it right, they say that it is, that to allow you to prepare your witness statement, you attended the BRE's site, yes?
I did for about 1 or 2 days, maybe.
Well, they say it was a 3-day period.
Yes, that's probably right, yes.
They also say that you were unaccompanied by BRE's legal representatives.
That is correct, yes.
Were you accompanied by anybody?
Yes, my ex-colleague Angela Richards came in occasionally, but I was, yes, I was given access to what I needed predominantly.
Right. Who arranged the access? Was it BRE's lawyers, or did you arrange it?
I think it was BRE themselves, I think.
Who was the main contact point at the BRE who afforded you that access?
Dr. Debbie Smith.
And Field Fisher tell us that you were provided with access to any hard copy and electronic material held by the BRE that you considered was potentially relevant to your witness statement and you wished to review. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. But as I alluded to, I think this morning, what had happened was, for some reason, and I don't know who made the decision, that they moved a lot of the files from their original positions, and in doing so, made searching extremely difficult. So I essentially got what I could in that period, and may not have necessarily picked everything up because it wasn't necessarily in the places I thought it would be.
But just to be clear, when you told us yesterday in your evidence that you were reliant on what was sent to you, you were issued a packet of stuff, and material was disclosed by the inquiry, and you had no access to files after the fire on any of the systems. That's not true, is it, if Field Fisher's letter this morning is correct, as you've confirmed?
Yes, no, I neglected, I forgot that I understood I went down there, but what I meant was I had, because I was only there, I could only review a certain amount of stuff. I think while I was there, I looked at some of the test videos and basically used them to ask the questions the inquiry had put to me in that regard.
Mr. Clark, the impression you gave from your evidence yesterday, which I read out to you in detail from the transcript, gave the impression that you were responsive only to the material that the BRE had pulled together and sent to you. And that's not true, is it? In fact, you went to the BRE yourself and was afforded full access to whatever you asked for.
Yes, in that I was very reliant on them trying to find things for me.
That's not sent a package of material.
No, I was originally sent a package of material. So
why did you, when answering my questions yesterday about the source of the documents that you used to compile your statement, why didn't you tell us that so far from simply being sent a pack of material and being reliant on documents disclosed to you, in fact, you had had a 3-day access at the BRE to any documents that you wanted to see? Why didn't you tell us that?
Because you hadn't asked the question of that, and I'm being asked questions that span almost a decade and a half of complex and very detailed material, which in reality 3 days is scratching the surface.
When you told the inquiry yesterday on oath at page 182 of the transcript that you had no access to any files or any of the systems, that's not correct, is it? You were afforded 3 days roving access, unsupervised by any lawyer, at the BRE.
Yeah, that's not wholly correct, because the point is, yes, I had access. I don't disagree with what you say. I had access to it, but not wholly access, because what had happened was every time I went to a place where I thought the information should be, because it had been moved, it was no longer there, and it was the BRE had to search for documents that I thought were relevant, and on occasions they couldn't find them in the time I was there.
Why didn't you just tell us all of that yesterday, rather than giving us the impression that you were sent documents? That's what you said. I was sent documents.
Yeah, I just forgot I'd gone there. I've never been in this situation. I don't know what's relevant. I'm here sitting answering questions that you're asking, and
you've forgotten the fact that you'd made a 3-day visit to the BRE. 3-day visit to the BRE at a time when you were no longer employed there.
No, I hadn't forgotten, but it didn't come up in the questions you were asking. So I'm reliant on the questions you asked me, sir. It wasn't for any malicious reason other than it didn't come up in the way we were talking, and I didn't seem it was relevant.
I'll put it one more time. When you told the inquiry that post the fire, all the systems were locked down and I had no access to any files on any of the systems, that was false, wasn't it? That was false.
Probably when I said that, I meant while I was still working for BRE, I think. I didn't necessarily mean when I was preparing my statement. Maybe I misspoke there.
No, that's not the case, because the next sentence that I read you is, so anything that I was given, I was reliant on the BRE to provide me. And this is in the context of my asking you about the material that you used to collate your statement. Why have you given I'm putting it to you that you've given false evidence to the inquiry about this.
It's not false evidence. It was a foresight, something that I can't explain. I forgot when you were asking the question that I'd been there.
How could you conceivably have forgotten a 3-day visit and a trawl through all the materials in order to prepare your witness statement for this inquiry? That's not correct.
It was, you asked me a question, I answered it as I remember at the time. I didn't necessarily think that was pertinent. It's not there to mislead or convey anything else other than as I answered at the time. And if I should have answered to that, then I can only apologise for not answering in that way. And it wasn't to mislead or anything other than that.
During this 3-day visit, Mr. Clark, did you see Stephen Howard?
Only to say hello.
You say only to say hello. Did you see Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Did you say?
No, just as I said, only to say hello. I said, hello, how are you? And that was it.
Did you discuss why you were there?
No, I didn't discuss anything with Stephen Howard.
After all, you left in December 2017.
Sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
Yes. Did you discuss why you were there?
I didn't directly. I think Dr. Debbie Smith may have informed him that I was coming, but I didn't discuss directly whether it was there, as far as I can remember.
Did you talk to Debbie Smith when you were there?
I did, yes.
What did you say to? What was the conversation about?
Just usual pleasantries, and she then sort of I had an office next to hers. They'd arranged for a computer, I think, which had limited access to the drives. And then she was basically said, if there's anything you need to talk to Angela Richards, who was the liaison there with me.
So she knew why you were there. Did you discuss with her the substance of the questions that you were being asked by the inquiry, for which purpose you were there?
No, I didn't, no.
Did you see Tony Baker while you were there?
Not that I recall, no.
When you were reviewing the documents over this 3-day period, were you alone or were you accompanied by anybody?
Predominantly alone.
Predominantly. And
Yes.
you the name of Angela Richards.
Yeah, so she was, if there was a document that I couldn't find, she was doing the search, or arranging the searches with IT. And
on that point, were you reviewing the documents in electronic form or in written form? Or
yes, I was indeed, yes.
Electronically?
Electronically, yes.
Now, Field Fisher have also told us that it is likely that the collation exercise, the exercise of collation of all the documents that you that would have been needed for your exercise of review were completed before you prepared your witness statement, which was signed on the 15th of July 2019, as we've established. Is that right?
I think that's correct, yes. I think my understanding is they did a trawl by name, and they used keywords, I think, a keyword search.
So by the time you came to do your review of the electronic documents, a collation exercise, do you accept that a collation exercise had already been done by the BRE?
Yes, that is correct, I think, yes. And that, I think, was the pack. When I said I received a pack, I think that's what I was referring to.
Right.
What I received as part of that exercise, yeah.
Did you review any hard copy documents?
I think I may have seen the hard copy file of the Celotex report, of the Celotex.
Or the test file?
The test file, yes, that's correct. Sorry, I've missed the first bit again.
Test file we've been talking about.
That's correct, yes.
And you said you had access to the drives. What does that mean?
So the way the data was stored, we had two main drives. So predominantly the video and any data would be kept on a drive which was specific to the burn hall, which was called the S drive. And any files that were not video files and data, like the MSDS sheets, etc., were kept on what we call the V drive, under a file, I think it was called Anvil or something like that. But as I said, post the fire, that seemed to have been moved. So I think it may have not necessarily brought back as much information on the search, potentially.
You were given free access to these drives, were you?
I was given access to the drives, but as I say, that all of the data didn't always seem to be there that I was expecting.
Now let's get back to the evidence we were on before the lunch break. Do you remember that after the naked test in November 2014, Kingspan carried out a further test on K15 in May 2005, 31st of May 2005?
I remember that, yes.
And let's go to KIN 300713, page 5, please.
Can I have the reference again, please, Mr. Miller?
KIN 30200713 at page 5. This is an internal report from the 7th of January 2008, in which Ivor Meredith of Kingspan explained in respect to the 2005 test his views. And if we go to the second paragraph.
Sorry, Mr. Millett, do you mean 2005? You said 2008.
Yes, it's a report of 2008.
Okay.
And just to make that good, if you like, I can show you earlier pages in it.
Oh, no, it says MSK METSEC. That makes sense.
Take it from me that I was right about that, at least.
Yes.
The second paragraph, it says this: in 2005, Kingspan tested to the new British standard formerly known as FARNOTE 9, BS 8414 Part 1, and based on the advice of BRE, we used a non-combustible board as cladding, as the BRE stated. If you test with a non-combustible cladding, then you could state your system works with all non-combustible cladding systems. After successfully passing this test, the BRE moved the goalposts and stated that we could only say that our system works with that specific non-combustible board. However, the test result met the criteria of BS 8414 Part 1 and BR 135, and is a very useful document when securing specifications for facades above 18 meters, where the substrata is masonry. The reason for this shift, in the BRE's opinion, is that they are still learning about this test, and Kingspan were one of the first to test a ventilated rain screen construction. Now, I put that before you, Mr. Clark. Let's now look at what Mr. Meredith says about it. Can we go to day 75, please? Page 58. I'll take this quickly because it's a short question. If we go to the bottom of page 58, the question there is, did you have discussions with the BRE about how that test might be used prior to it being carried out? Answer, the BRE were learning as we were learning. Every test we performed, they would send many people to watch it because they were still agreeing their exact rules there at the page, their scope of application. So there were no firm rules to say if you tested in this configuration, it would be acceptable for use in these scenarios. So although the BRE had suggested that if we test with a non-combustible cladding, we will be acceptable for use with all non-combustible cladding systems. Question, who was it who suggested that within the BRE? Answer, I believe it was Sarah Colwell. Etc. goes on like that. And there's also a reference to that at page 63. Were you aware at the time, May 2005, or perhaps later, of this conversation?
No, I wasn't aware, no.
Do you agree that any suggestion that testing with one non-combustible cladding would mean that you could use any non-combustible cladding defeats the whole purpose of classification to BR135 in the first place?
Yes, I would agree. Yes, it's something I don't think Sarah would say.
That's because the test is intended to be system specific, isn't it?
It is, yes, it's a system test, definitely.
Did you yourself give any advice to the effect described in the note we've just seen?
In 2005, no, I was primarily a technician at that point in terms of the cladding. I never had any discussions in terms of interpretation or anything along those lines.
Did the BRE give advice initially, at least to Kingspan, that the use of non-combustible boards as the putative rain screen material meant that any non-combustible material could be used, as Ivor Meredith recorded in the note we've seen?
That's not a conversation I've ever heard had in those regards. No, I wouldn't.
Now, it's right, isn't it, that the May 2005 BS8414 test used a cementitious particle board as the outer face?
Yes, I believe that's true, yes.
That's recorded in the test report, isn't it?
Yes. The UCA board.
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
The UCA board, I think it was described as.
Yes. Now, you're aware that Kingspan say that it was or are you aware, this is a question I should say, are you aware that Kingspan now say that it was a cellulose fibre cement board?
I have heard that, yes. I don't know where they got that from in the light of the time that's passed. Yes, I had heard that.
You in your answer a moment ago, and there may have been a little confusion because of over speaking, you say UCA board, I think it was described as. Where was it described as UCA board?
I think that was, I've seen an email that Mr. Meredith sent me to how he described it.
I see. So this is evidence at the time, is that right?
Yes, there's an email where he describes what the board is called and the fire break details, as far as I recall.
Right. Now let's go to KIN 405079, please. This is a photograph of the BS8414 Part 1 system as tested. Are you able to remember looking at this photograph, and particularly the grey outer boards we can see there, what you believed it was at the time?
No. In reality, when you look at these boards, it's very difficult to tell what they are from the front, because that tends to be sort of quite homogeneous in its form. They put like a slurry of concrete, a cement over the top. you can only really tell what they're like from either looking at the edge or the back of the board. So that doesn't really give you much indication. And sometimes with these boards, you almost have to break them to see what they are.
Right. Can you explain how there could have been confusion, perhaps at the time, between cementitious particle board and a cellulose fibre cement board?
So what did you call the first board?
Cementitious.
A cementitious. So the difference between the two boards is they're both cementitious, but one will have probably something like glass fibres in, whereas the other one will have the equivalent of wood chips. I probably, at the time in 2005, was probably less aware of the difference than I am now.
Was a record made of what this material we can see here was when it arrived at the BRE's premises?
I think I've seen some drawings which were done by my colleague David Hoare, and he described it as non-combustible board.
Was there something like a delivery note from which a product could be identified?
Not that I can recall with this passage of time, no.
Would that have been the system? Would there have been a system whereby the precise product was delivered and signed for, very much in the same way that we saw in 2014 with the Celotex components?
I think I would imagine there would be, but not a formal system.
Right.
So as before, it would have probably arrived, somebody would have signed for it and then given the delivery note to the client.
And at that time, was there a system of retaining on a file or in some kind of record keeping the precise identity of the material which we can see there?
Yes, again, I think at that point the test files were in operation. Yes.
What did you think this board was?
It's such a long time. My understanding was it was a non-combustible cement particle board of some type. I can't recall well enough to differentiate between whether it was a fibre or a chip board type.
Do you remember there being any discussion about the nature of this item?
No, none at all, no.
Did you think this was going to be another indicative test as had been carried out in the November of 2004, or was this going to be a full BS 8414 test that anybody using it would seek to replicate when building their cladding system?
I think at that time I wouldn't have been aware of what the ultimate end use would be. One of the things we would do, I suppose, is if the client said I wanted to do a test, if it passed, it may then turn into a full test. So we would essentially test it on the understanding that if it did pass, it could be used to as a full test. So it would be treated in such a way that it was a full test. Yes, it wasn't an indicative test, if that's what you mean.
Right. Now, Mr. Meredith said in his evidence, and I'll just give the reference, day 76, page 207 at line 22, that this kind of board was not traditionally suitable for the outermost layer of a cladding system. Would you agree with him?
From experience, yes, I would think it would be very unusual, yes.
Did it occur to you to ask yourself why it would be that Kingspan were testing Kingspan K15 using a non-combustible cement particle board as the rain screen material if it wasn't traditionally suitable for the outermost layer of a cladding system?
At that point of time, no, it wouldn't have occurred to me to ask that question. My role wasn't to ask those types of questions. It was to assist and deliver the test.
Right. What about Mr. Hoare or Miss Colwell? Was there any discussion about that topic that you're aware of at the time?
I don't recall such conversation. No, not at all. No.
Let's look at some of the correspondence surrounding the report. Can we go please to BRE 403278? This is a series of emails between you, David Hoare, and Mr. Meredith, Ivor Meredith at Kingspan, from the 3rd of November 2005. We looked at this one earlier on. If we can go to page 2, please, at the bottom, you can see that there's an email from Ivor Meredith to David Hoare and to you, Mr. Clark, on the 27th of October 2005. And you can see from it that Ivor Meredith was chasing a test report. You see that?
Yes, I can.
Our test report. Yes?
Yes.
And this was 5 months after the test. Do you know why a draft report had not been issued by that stage?
No, I have absolutely no idea whatsoever.
It's quite a long gap, isn't it?
Without knowing what else was going on at that period of time, I don't know. I know possibly around that time we were working on the Rose Park care homes project, so it could have been to do with that. I think maybe I can't recall it. Such a long time ago.
At any rate, if we can go to the top of page 2, we see an email the following day, and I'm sorry, we need the bottom of page 1 just to pick up the date and the timestamp. 28th of October, so it's the next day, back to Ivor Meredith, copy to David Hoare, and then if we flip to the top of page 2, you can say, Ivor, the report is in its final iterations and should be signed off any day now. I must apologise for the delay getting it out to you. In terms of the video, I can do you a new copy which will come out with the report. The only outstanding info which would be of use and which should be included in the report is details for the intumescent fire stop that you used. If you could let me have the info, I would include it. So we can see you apologise for the delay there and said it should be ready any day. In fact, the report wasn't issued until the 8th of December 2005, was it?
I think that's correct, yes.
So you had to wait another 5 weeks. Why was that?
Again, I've no idea. At this time, this wasn't my primary role. It was a job I was doing along other things as well. And there were, I think there were other projects going on as well. I without seeing what I was doing at the time, I don't particularly know.
You can see that you asked him to provide the details of the intumescent fire stop that had been used in the test. Did the BRE not have its own records of that?
Only, as far as I'm aware, was photographic. It was really to describe what it should have been called and what its brand name was.
Right. So does that tell us that you've done a test and couldn't identify this component other than from a photograph and from the brand name?
It wasn't. My recollection is that Mr. Meredith brought it with him, and there were no identification marks on the product. It was essentially just 2 bits of metal with some intumescent in between. It wasn't marked up with a manufacturer or anything like that, as far as I can remember.
Was there no system in place whereby the intumescent fire stop was taken from Mr. Meredith, logged, identified clearly before being and then photographed before being used on the rig?
At that time, probably not. No, I thought so.
So again, is this even then a system whereby the client would bring their own component in and you would just use it without logging it?
Yes, because they were reliant on delivery. We were reliant on them to deliver the sample. So to a certain extent, yes.
Right. I mean, even at this stage, and what's coming across from this evidence is that you've placed a great deal of trust on the client, if I can use that word, to bring in the right components and to bring to your attention any particular nature or feature of those components. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, yes. Yep.
Why did you place such trust in your clients, given that you were carrying out what was supposed to be a rigorous, robust, and impartial test?
At that time, I don't know, because it wasn't the thing I was involved with necessarily. So the higher level stuff was done by other people.
Why wasn't the BRE sceptical of every client that crossed its threshold, given its role as a testing house to a British standard in respect of fire safety?
I think they were and are. It depends when you say we're skeptical. It's like I don't know how far down the line you go. It clearly states in BRE's terms and conditions is that the rig is to be provided to BRE, and we have no say in how that's put together and what they use, and it's incumbent on them to provide us with that information. I think one of the things you said earlier was to what degree do we say to clients, do this, do that, and essentially that was the thing, is if you get into that stage where you're telling the client what to do, you're going into the realms of consultancy.
I'm not suggesting that you should be telling the client what to do. On the contrary, what I'm suggesting to you, I'm really asking, actually, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just asking you why it was that there was such trust between the BRE and its client, given your role as an impartial, robust, and ruthlessly independent testing house.
That's a question I can't answer, given that at that time. I think that's, yes, it's probably a question for someone else.
Right. Very well. Go to the top of this email thread on page 1, please. Mr. Meredith responds to your question, as you can see, on the 3rd of November 2005. And he says, Phil, with regards to the ventilated cavity barriers, please use the descriptions below for the test report. He sets out some details there. And do you accept that it's a quite a generic description of the ventilated rain screen barrier?
The first line, 2.5 millimeter graphite. Yes, it's very generic. Yes.
And then there's a more detailed description below, identifying them as Promoseal barriers for the confidential section of the BRE report. You see that?
I do, yes.
What did you take the reference to the confidential section to mean?
I didn't think there was a confidential section. I don't know what he means by that.
Did you go back and ask him?
At that point, no, I had no reason to.
Here was an email to you in which he's giving you information to be used in what he thinks is going to be a confidential section of the BRE report. Why didn't you go back and tell him there isn't a confidential section? Do you want me to publish this information or not? Why didn't you ask him that question?
At the time, it wasn't in my remit to ask that. Never occurred to me to ask that question.
Well, if he was saying something or proceeding on an assumption that you could tell was erroneous, why wasn't it your job to go back and just correct him and say, well, there isn't a confidential section. Now, what do you want me to do with the information?
I've no idea. It's far too long ago to even remember what my thinking was at that time.
Mr. Meredith told us in his oral evidence, day 75, page 80, lines 4 to 7, that he meant the BRE test file when he referred to the confidential section. Is that how you understood it at the time?
No, no. That's not how I understood it.
Did you think at the time that this rig with its cementitious particle board and these components on it that he's identified even generically would have been representative of a real life 18 metre plus build?
At that time, although I'd worked with the research for the initial testing, this was probably the first the first of few rain screens we'd done at that point. So my knowledge, my personal knowledge, wasn't sufficiently well advanced to say whether it was representative or not. So I couldn't answer that question.
Just taking a step back then in the logic, were you aware at the time, at the very least, of the fact that a test to BS 8414 Part 1 to BR 135 criteria was a full system test, which, if passed, applied only to a full cladding system to exactly that build-up?
I don't know if my understanding of BR 135 at that time was sufficient to make the connection, because as I say, I wasn't dealing with 135 and compliance to that.
Right, well then let's ask the question a bit more generally. Were you not aware at all that if a system on the rig at the BRE passed a BS 8414 Part 1 test, that test could only be used to approve a full system which corresponded exactly with the system as tested, and not any system which was different from it? As a basic principle, did you understand that?
I can't recall exactly at 2005. I would say probably yes in general terms, but
did it occur to you at the time, therefore, that the system described in the 2005 report was completely unrepresentative of any rain screen cladding facade that would be typically installed on a tall building?
Probably from experience, yes, it did wonder, but I'm sure you're going to come onto it later, but I don't think this system has ever issued a BR 135. So there was no other reason to treat it other than just a standard test report for a client that they requested.
Well, what was the purpose of the test then? If it wasn't right, let me start again. What was the purpose of the test then, if not at least to try to achieve classification to BR 135?
You can undertake an 8414 test and not necessarily request a BR 135 for it. It would be, I don't know if the system changed. I have a feeling now if you undertake an 8414 test, you get, if it passes, you get a BR 135 as a matter of course. I think back in 2005, I don't know whether that was necessarily the case. I wasn't in a position to write those, so I can't definitively answer that. That's possibly, again, something for somebody who, someone like the likes of Tony or Stephen Howard. But I think in 2005 that you didn't necessarily always get a BR 135.
You say that you probably did realise that this test configuration did not reflect a build in the real world. Was that, to your way of looking at it, obvious to Kingspan at the time?
I think the fact that they delivered something that they wanted testing, it must have related to something that they were seeing in the market. The problem is as I say, I'm not a facade engineer. I haven't been out and looked at numerous buildings, and I didn't at the time understand what they were selling into and what the market they were selling into, and how that system represented what they were selling.
Now, I showed you Ivor Meredith's 7th of January 2008 report, and I read the passage out to you, particularly about where the BRE moved the goalposts, and then stated you could only say that our system works with that specific non-combustible board. You remember that, did I read you? I can go back to it.
Yes,
again.
I remember that. Yes, yes, I've seen that statement before.
Yes. Is he right? Is he right that the BRE initially told Kingspan that the test could be used in a variety of systems, and then, as he put it, moved the goalposts?
I can't say, as I think I said earlier, that's never a conversation that I was party to. So if that was the case, he would have had that with senior members of staff, not me.
Right. So does it follow from that, to your way of looking at it, Kingspan would always have known from the word go that the system test they did was all but useless, on the basis that nobody built rain screen cladding systems using cement particle boards as a rain screen?
If you wanted to apply for a 135, then potentially yes, I think you're correct.
Yes. Now, in paragraph 87 of your statement, which is at page 21, you tell us that you were present at that test. Is that correct?
I think from recollection I was, yes.
You also say that it's highly likely that Sarah Colwell, Richard Colwell and David Hall would also have been present.
Yes, that was pretty standard at the time.
Right. And there's no written record of who was there. Do you know why that is?
I think until I introduced the assigning sheet, there weren't written records necessarily at that point.
Right. What was it that prompted or allowed you to remember the fact that you were present at this test? Did you see a document?
No, primarily because I think most of the tests I was there. I do recall the test.
Right. Let's go to BRE 405621, page 61, please. These are David Hall's notes of the test. And we can see this is a manuscript document, so let's take it slowly. You can see that he notes times down the very far left-hand column, and then other times or time marks in the second column from the left, and then some comments. And you can see the date in the top right-hand corner, 310505.
Can I just clarify something, if that's okay? I think the numbers on the far left-hand side appear to be my writing. Right,
I see. Thank you. That was a question I had. But so, did you add those numbers, presumably after Mr. Hall had created this document?
Yes, I think I did.
Right. Okay. And just help me. It's right, isn't it, that BS 8414 requires records to begin at least 5 minutes before ignition of the fuel source?
That is correct, yes.
And is it right that the timings in the right-hand column, in other words, the second column from the left, are times from the start of observation?
So the 0 would be start of the logger, so that's -5 in essence, yes.
And the left-hand column reflects the time from ignition?
Yes.
And that's clear, isn't it? Because the 0 at the top, logger started, and then as you get to 5 minutes, ignition, yes?
Yes.
And then you've put 0 at that point, yes?
That's correct, yes.
So these times are supposed to be exactly 5 minutes apart, yes?
Yes, yes.
Yes. And these are the timings, do you accept, which should have been used in the report, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Now let's look at the report. Let's go to BRE 405769, page 105. The precursor to the reports and correspondence. This is an email, 1st of December 2005, from David Hall to you, and you can see that at the bottom of the page, I think we'll start with that one. Phil, where is the revised report, which was due to be with me today? As we discussed yesterday, Wednesday, I need it on my desk first thing Monday morning, as Kingspan are getting very indignant about the delay. We have to get the report to them immediately if we are not to completely piss them off and lose their custom. Your response next day, sorry, Dave, I was doing a job with Steve, then went home early, not feeling well. I'm still at home, feeling a bit better, but still flu-like. I'll work on it from here and email it for you to look at. If you're happy, it can go out Monday. And then he comes back to you on the 5th, 3 days later. Phil, sorry to push, but I'm getting my arse kicked too. Dave, do you know why there had been such a lengthy delay in issuing the report?
If you look at paragraph 2, that appears to mean I was off. I think potentially at that point I was doing some off-site work with my colleague Steve Manchester. I used to also go off-site and do, no, it wouldn't have been with. So I think I was doing a project with Southern Water. So I may have been off-site for a couple of weeks, I think, at that point, if that's the right time. That's the only Steve I know who I would have been working with at that period of time.
What would the consequences of losing Kingspan as a customer have been?
They were quite a large customer, but not necessarily the largest customer. But like any organisations, you don't want to annoy your clients.
And this has been a 6-month delay, hadn't it? Because we're now early December and the test has been done at the end of May.
Yes, that's correct, yes.
So this is a pretty, it's not really surprising that Kingspan were getting indignant.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that was an unexpected delay. There were occasions where things would take a long time with other projects, but yeah, you're right. So I suppose they were.
Was the report then rushed out because of Mr. Hoare's very clear signal to you about the consequences?
I don't think rushed out would be the case, no.
How much preparation had you done on the report before the beginning of December and this email exchange?
I can't recall. It was such a long time ago. I've done thousands of reports and jobs since then. I wouldn't know.
Was it normal to leave a test report for 6 months after the test before seeing it to the client? Occasionally, yes. I think I remember at that point I was quite heavily loaded with lots of other jobs, so I must admit I was taking on more than I should have been, really, and it was affecting some of the delivery times for stuff. It looks from what we've got that you didn't do anything on the report. Got a boot up the backside from your boss at the beginning of December, and then got the report together over a matter of days, issuing it on the 8th of December. Is that what happened?
I can't recall. And even if it was, it went through the due diligence process anyway. So regardless if it was done in 3 months or 2 days, it still went through the same due process and was checked by others. So again, other people had sight of it, and had they had any questions, they would have pushed them back to me to get rectified.
And let's go to BRE 402511. This is a copy of the test report. And you can see from the bottom right-hand corner that it's dated the 8th of December 2005 and has a test number 220876. An important number, keep that in your mind, 220876. And if you go to page 6, please, you can see the description of the test build-up under the heading description of product. Then third item down, fixing details. Can you see that?
Yes.
And if you read down it refers to a number of different components, and then 4 lines down. Sorry, I'll start at the beginning. You can see 60 millimeters thick Cooltherm K15, which were 1200 millimeters times 900 millimeters was mechanically fixed to the blockwork substrate. 1200 millimeters times 900 millimeters times 6 millimeters thick cement particle boards manufactured by UAC were mechanically fixed at 600 millimeter centers to an aluminium railing system, also mechanically fixed to the blockwork substrate, etc. I don't think I need to read out the rest of it. You can see there the reference to the cement particle boards, yes?
Yes.
And then a little bit lower down, it says fire stopping was provided by a ventilated rain screen barrier system comprising of nominal 2.5 millimeter thick graphite-based intumescent strip bonded to nominal 0.6 millimeter thick galvanized steel sheet, positioned 0.5 meters and 4 meters above the fire chamber on both the main face and the wing face. Full manufacturer's details are held on file. But that then repeats, therefore, doesn't it, the generic description of the fire barriers that Mr. Meredith had given to you?
It does, yes, indeed.
Do you know why the more detailed description identifying Promoseal as the brand or manufacturer not used, as Mr. Meredith had set out in some detail in his 3rd of November 2005 email to go to the confidential part of the report?
No, I don't particularly. I have seen, not specifically other 8414 reports, but I've seen other reports that have been issued even in the last sort of 5 years, where details of what the manufacturer has of the product is actually not declared. So I don't think it was necessarily unusual. And I think there are even provisions within the report where it says about details that the client classed as confidential. I may be mistaken on that, but that's my understanding.
Certainly, as the manufacturer's details are concerned, you do say at the end of this paragraph, as I've just read to you, full manufacturer's details are held on file. My question really is, why did the details of the Promoseal have to be held on file and not put in the fixing details so that someone could see it?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Because without knowing what those were, without being able to have the manufacturer's details available up front, the system can't be replicated, can it?
No, but you don't. My understanding is that the 8414 report isn't the menu to how to build a system.
Well, that's an interesting way of putting it. Would you accept that the list of components needs to be replicated in order for any system to in order for the system to satisfy the regulation?
Yes, I would say more in the BR 135, then I would probably say more in that. Yes, I would agree. And I've seen, as I say, lots of 13501 documents and small flame tests where none of this information is declared, and it still states even then, even today, that this information is held on file. I'm not certain as to why that is. Sometimes I think it should be declared more often, but at this time I don't understand why that was asked.
Right. Well, let's look at BS 8414 Part 1 from 2002. BRE 408579, please. This is a document you exhibit yourself to your witness statement, Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Can we go to page 11? Well, let's start with page 1, because that's what it is. And you can see BS 8414 Part 1 2002. And if you go to page 11, clause 9, test report. It says the test report shall include the following information. C, a full description of the cladding system, together with details of materials and components used. See that?
I do, yes.
I imagine that you must have been familiar with this British standard when producing this 8th of December test report, no?
Yes, yes.
Therefore, you must have known that the BRE was required under the British standard to provide a full description of the cladding system together with details of materials and components used, no?
Yes, although at this time there were templated documents for the test report, and again, I think had there been any issue from a senior member of staff necessarily, they would have said, "No, hang on, you need to change this and describe it more fully," and that wasn't done.
Do you accept that full details of the cavity barriers required by clause 9C, paragraph 9C of this British standard, were not provided in the report, which was to be made available to clients?
It doesn't say the name of the manufacturer. It says full details together with details and materials components used. It doesn't say the manufacturer. You have to say who the manufacturer is.
No, but you didn't even set out the full details that Mr. Meredith had provided you. You summarised them.
Maybe I did. I can't recall.
Do you accept that this report and its description of the cavity barriers was not compatible with the requirements of BSA 414 Part 1?
In hindsight, probably yes, but as I say, it went through the signing process, and if anybody in a senior position had any issues, they would have sent it back and made me change it.
Can we go back to the test report then, please, at page 6? It's BRE 402511. You can see, as I showed you, there was a reference to cement particle boards in the third line. Have you any reason to think that that was a misdescription of the product actually used in the test?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think it's a mistake for cellulose fiberboard?
No, cement particle board. And now reading that, I would say cement particle board to me, from my knowledge now, would contain cellulose fibers. Yes.
Well, maybe there's nothing in it, but if there was any distinction, any real and important distinction between cement particle board and cellulose fibre board, if there was a distinction, and in fact cellulose fibre board was used in and not cement particle board, then this description would be wrong, wouldn't it?
I would say cellulose fibre and cement particle are the same. If it had said it was cement fibre board, because my understanding is there's three types of board. Two types of board. So cellulose board and cement particle board, I would say, are the same material. Cement fibre board, which I think has glass fibre binders in it, is a different material. That's my understanding.
At any rate, did Ivan Meredith ever ask you to correct this report in that respect?
No.
Now, going back, if we may please, to the handwritten record of the test, BRE 405621. That's I think not. It's an interesting looking document, but I'm not sure it's the document I want. I want BRE 405621.
It is 61.
Page 61. we've now established whose writing is whose. Which are the timings that would be used in the report, which should be used in the report?
I would say the left-hand column.
Right, so the ones you added, yes?
Yes.
Now let's do a comparison. Can we put the report at page 10, BRE 40211 at page 10, next to this document? So keep this document on the screen and have up at the same time BRE 402511 at page 10. Now let's just look at it. Do you accept, first of all, that this page on the right-hand side of the screen is section 5.1 from the test report of the 8th of December 2005?
Yes, I do, yes.
Under the heading Visual Observations. Right, let's look at the timings and let's compare. In the BRE report, the tip of the flame is said to have reached 4 meters at 10 minutes. You see that?
Yes.
The tip of flames at 4 meters height. Yes?
Yes.
And that's within, that's with a 5-minute time delay. The actual time the flame reaches 4 meters is 5 minutes. Yes?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So flame, arrow, 4 meters. Right. What was the source of the timings in the report?
I think I had looked at this, and I think this is what appears to have happened is the first couple of from up to 427 was correct, I think.
Yes.
And then the 10 has been transposed across. Some of these as well in it may be in the past, if the timings weren't exactly correct, I think they would rewatch the video on occasions. So these times might change, but that's the 5 and 10 minutes is a typographical, appears to me to be a typographical error, which has then been perpetuated through the rest of the report and hasn't been picked up. I
see. So is this right that in the 10 minutes in the test report should read 5 minutes?
Yes, yes.
And then that 5-minute delayed version is that inconsistency, it then runs through the printed report, doesn't it?
It appears to be, yes.
The printed version is wrong to that extent, yes?
It is, yes, I agree, yes.
Right. Now, that shows, doesn't it, that the flames were at 4 meters by 5 minutes, not 10 minutes, yes?
According to David Hall's record, yes, that's correct.
Is that not critically important when you're doing a test in order to satisfy BR135 criteria?
No.
No?
This test was never issued a BR135.
No, I appreciate that, but it was actually 10 years later, but we'll come to that later in the story.
Yes.
When you're issuing a test report, is it not absolutely critically important to get the timings of the progress of the fire correct and not out by 5 minutes?
It is, yes, and clearly this hadn't been picked up by myself or by the person who did the sanity check on it. Sorry, I missed that.
How come?
I have no idea. It's 15 years ago. I have no idea.
It is remarkable, isn't it? It's remarkably slapdash, isn't it? That the visual observations and the time progress of the fire up the rig was out by 5 minutes in the final issued version of the report.
Yes, should have been corrected. Yes, you're right.
So it should have been corrected. It's slapdash, careless.
I wouldn't say it was careless. Yeah, it should have been corrected, and nobody's ever drawn it to our attention, and it's not correct.
When did you first realise it was not correct?
When did I think I think something was asked when one of the BSRs had pointed something out. I think that's when it was in the opening statements.
I see. So during the opening statements for module 2 of this inquiry.
That's correct, yes.
Right. And you've got no explanation sitting there today or standing there today of how this error came about?
No, I reviewed it, and the only conclusion was it's instead of following down the 2 columns, it's inadvertently moved across to the right and it's gone that way, and it's not been picked back up.
You say it wasn't picked up on a peer review. This error originated with you.
Yeah, but I didn't peer review it, so it was peer reviewed by somebody else.
Of course, but this error originated with you.
Well, then, yes.
You accept this error.
That's the whole idea of peer reviewing, is that people pick up errors that people have made.
Well, that may be, Mr. Clark. Do you accept as a fact that this error originated with you?
Yes, if I wrote that, then yes.
If I wrote that. Who else?
I mean, sorry.
What is
Yes,
it?
I would say yes.
Now, I want to ask you some questions about your correspondence with Kingspan relating to classifying this test to BR135 in 2005. Can we go to your witness statement, please, at page 27 and go to paragraph 111? You say there, and I'll show you the question before we look at your answer. Question 5V, was there any request from the test sponsor before 2015 for the BRE to produce a classification report to BR135 in respect to the system tested on the 31st of May 2005? When, if so, please explain as far as you're able why no classification report for this system was in fact produced until 2015. That's the question. And you say, from Mr. Meredith's email dated 25th November 2005, which I've referred to above, it appears that a discussion about classification to BR135 was contemplated. But you go on to say, I do not know whether any discussion took place, or if it did, why the period of time between the test being undertaken and the formal request for a BR135 classification report was so long. Now you refer here to this email of the 25th of November 2005. Let's look at that. BRE 403282, please, at page 2. You can see at the top of that page that Mr. Meredith emails you, and you need, I think, I'm sorry about this, the very bottom of page 1 to see that it comes from either Meredith. You see that?
Yes.
We flip back to page 2, 24th November 2005, to you, copied to David Hoare and Sarah Colwell. Is this the email you're referring to in your statement?
I believe it is, yes.
And the text says, subject BS8414 part 1 test data. How are you getting on with the test report? Does this get automatically assessed in accordance with BRE 135, or is that something we need to look at separately? Regards, Ivor Meredith. And we can see that here comes the response or internal discussion. BRE 403282, same email run, second email on page 1, please. On the 29th of November, at the bottom of that page, you can see that you write to Ivor Meredith and say, Ivor, I'm very sorry for the delay in your receiving the report. It's been written and once signed off should be with you at the beginning of next week. I'll include a new copy of the test video for you as well. In terms of your question about BR135, this is a question for Sarah to answer. I'll speak to her and get an answer for you. And he responds and says, thanks, Phil. It's the video of the indicative we're after, not the most recent one. As soon as the report is ready, could you please email me a copy in PDF format? We look forward to receiving the report. Now, you say in the email you're sending to him that the question of classification is one for Sarah Colwell. I will speak to her and get an answer for you. Did you speak to her?
I think I say later on in the statement that I can't recall specifically. Sarah was quite good at, if she was CC'd in, she was quite good at reading her emails that she was copied into. I would be very surprised if I didn't, but I don't remember the terms of the conversation and what she said.
Can we go to BRE 403280, please? This is Sarah Colwell's message to Mr. Meredith herself on the 29th of November 2005. And she says, either BR135 can be considered at the same time. We will need to look at the design details to see how it can be covered. I will chase the report from this end. Do you know what Sarah Colwell meant when she said, can be considered at the same time? We'll need to look at the design details to see how it can be covered. What does she mean by that?
This is the first time I've seen this email, so
Let me ask it a different way then. Did Sarah Colwell have a discussion with you before sending this email? Do you remember?
No. She was a senior staff member. Not,
right.
I can interpret it if you like, but
well, it could help maybe that it may have limited value, but what can you tell us about it?
So if she sent that to me and said BR135 could be considered at the same time, we need to look at the design. So that to me would say that she would look at it and say whether she thought it complied with the requirements of BR135. I'm not certain what she means by the second part of the sentence, but obviously it meant that she would give it some consideration.
Right. Mr. Chairman, I've got 3 or 4 more questions on this line before it might be an appropriate moment.
That's all right. Well, keep going, Mr. Millett.
Can we go to KIN 405156, please? This is an email from either Meredith to Sarah Colwell. On the 24th of March 2006, subject facade test assessments for Kingspan / PowerPoint slides. Sarah, I hope all is well. Further to our meeting last month, have you progressed with the K15 assessment to BRE 135? We could do with this ASAP. Please let me know predicted timeframe and costing. Were you aware of any such discussions about assessing K15 to BR 135?
No. Again, I think this is the first time I've ever seen this email. And at that time, I didn't deal with 135. It was done by other people.
Right.
Yeah.
It followed from that you were not at the meeting to which Mr. Meredith refers? No. Was there any discussion between you and Sarah Colwell in relation to classification of K15 to BR 135?
Not that I ever recall, no.
You know why no classification report was issued as Mr. Meredith had requested in 2005, 2006?
I have absolutely no idea. As I say, it wasn't something I dealt with. I don't know who was dealing with it and who she would have passed it on to, but and I have no idea. It came as a surprise to me.
In the event, do you accept as a fact that no BR135 classification was issued in respect of this test until 2015?
That is my understanding, yes. Yeah, that is correct, yes.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, if that suits you, Mr. Millett, it's a good point. We'll have a break now, Mr. Clark, just a short one for until about 3:35. I think that'll be about right. Please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence while you're on the break. And we'll see you in 15 minutes or so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. 3:35 then, please. Welcome back, everyone. Mr. Clark, welcome back. Are you able to see me and hear me clearly?
I can see you and hear you, sir, yes.
Thank you very much. Well then, Mr. Millett, when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Clark together, I should just tell you that it's most unlikely that I'm going to finish my questions for Mr. Clark this evening. And I'm going to have to ask you, Mr. Chairman, to invite Mr. Clark to come back tomorrow if it's not inconvenient to finish his evidence.
Well, Mr. Clark, you heard what Mr. Millett says. I'm sorry about that, because I know that it's inconvenient for most people who come to give evidence not to finish when they are told they are likely to finish. So I hope that's not going to make life too difficult for you.
No, sir, that's no problem at all.
All right, well, that's good. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes.
Right, Mr. Millett, on you go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Clark. Now, can I please ask you to go to KIN 5179. KIN 505179. This is an email from Ivor Meredith to KILPB Technical Services, dated Thursday, the 8th of June, 2006. And it's entitled, "What's Lurking Behind Your Facade?" And it says, "Please note the K15, what's lurking behind your facade," which seems to be a piece of promotional literature. What Mr. Meredith says is that it's been withdrawn by the marketing department, partly because it's considered not a good sales tactic to highlight the fact that you don't need class 0 below 18 meters. And it also says the BRE have complained about the use of the word approved and certification in our text. These are privileges that would cost us an extra £20,000, or 20k, as he says. Therefore, when referring to this test method, please use the following text. Kingspan Cooltherm K15 has been successfully tested to BS8414 Part 1, and when assessed in accordance with BRE 135, it's acceptable for use above 18 metres in accordance with the English, Scottish and Irish building regulations. Now let's look at the flyer he refers to. It's a KIN 405134. There it is. What's lurking behind your facade? And it's dated the 1st of January 1996. Were you aware of this flyer at the time? So first part of 2006.
I don't think I've ever seen this before, no.
Right. Now, the flyer says, if you look a little bit down, you scroll down, please, you'll see that it says, in the red letters, Kingspan Cooltherm K15 rain screen board has not only been tested by the Building Research Establishment, BRE, and awarded certification to BS8414 Part 1 2002, but has also been assessed and approved in accordance with BR 135. Now, that wasn't true, was it?
Clearly not, no. So that's a very incorrect statement.
If we go back to his email of the 8th of June 2006, please, KIN 405179. I showed you this, I'll just show it to you again. He says that the BRE have complained, you see in the second sentence.
I do, yes.
About the use of the word approved and certification in our text. Do you know who at the BRE had issued that complaint?
No, I don't, I'm afraid, no.
Were you aware of that complaint?
I wasn't, no.
Was it common practice at the time for the BRE to review manufacturers' product literature?
I'm unsure. It was something I never got involved with, so I can't definitively answer. I would be surprised if they didn't, if they saw stuff and was picked up by people, they wouldn't refer it back to someone or other. But I don't know whether it was common practice, if we had anybody who did it particularly in a systematic way.
Was it correct that the BRE would have charged another £20,000 to issue a classification report for this test?
To BR 135.
Yes.
I doubt it very much. No, I wouldn't have thought so.
How much would it have cost, do you think?
Oh, I've no idea. I would expect maybe no more than a couple of £1,000, maybe. I've no idea. That was just a guess off the top of my head.
I want to turn then to the subject of Kingspan's SOTEC METSEC testing in 2007 to 2008 under BS 8414 Part 2 of 2005. Can I go to, or ask you to go to page 78 of your witness statement, please? On that page, you can see towards the bottom of the page, question 12. It's got a long question, but I'll show it to you. It says, during the period 2005 to 17, did you have any involvement with any other tests to BS 8414 or classification to BR 135 of any system incorporating either K15 and or RS 5000? If so, please give full details of the nature of your involvement. Please also identify by date and report number where possible any such tests or BR 135 classification reports. In respect of tests to BS 8414 incorporating K15 or RS 5000, please ensure that you include any and all tests in which you had any involvement, including any tests which were terminated early and or where no test report was produced. Now, that's the question that you're asked. If we go to page 79 of your statement, paragraph 328, you say you were involved in numerous tests on systems incorporating K15, including as follows, and then you set out 5 of them. You see that?
Yes.
And you can see that you set out the SOTEC test report at C. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember being involved in a test to BS 8414 carried out on the 20th of December 2007, sponsored by Kingspan, SOTEC, and Wurst Alpine METSEC?
I do indeed, yes.
Yes. Can we go then to KIN 408847? This is an internal report produced by Ivor Meredith of Kingspan, dated the 7th of January 2008, parts of which I've already shown you. Can we go to page 2? Under executive summary, it refers to test method BS 8414 part 2. And in the 3rd paragraph, project stakeholders, you see that?
I do, yes.
Run jointly between SOTEC, METSEC and Kingspan with all costs split 3 ways. And then under test witnesses, towards the bottom of the screen, it says John Eggington, SOTEC, James Gallier, METSEC, Tony Baker, LPCB, Sarah Colwell, BRE, Phil Clark, BRE. So is it right you were there?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Is it right that Tony Baker, LPCB and Sarah Colwell of the BRE also attended?
I can't recall directly, but if that's what Ivor says, then probably is correct, yes.
Right. Do you know why all 3 of you attended?
I think I ran the test. I don't know why Sarah and Tony were there specifically. I think Tony may have been there because I think the overall plan of the project for SOTEC was to get a Red Book listing. So that's possibly why Tony Baker was there on as a witness for that scheme.
And a Red Book listing, can you just explain to people what that is?
So Red Book listing is run under the LPS, Loss Prevention, LPCB, sorry, Loss Prevention Certification Board. It uses essentially the 8414 test as the basis, but it has additional protocols that you have to adhere to. It's based around insurance loss as opposed to life safety, so it's got some additional requirements.
Is it right to say that in late 2007 there was significant interest at the BRE for its employees or executives to attend tests under BS 8414 Part 2?
I wasn't aware of such an undertaking being given.
Do you remember anything specific about the performance of the system tested on the 20th of December 2007?
Yes, it failed quite catastrophically, I think.
Oh, catastrophically. If we can go back to Mr. Meredith's report at page 2, you can see on page 2, he has a heading, construction from inside to out, and that's very near the bottom of the screen. You can have that in the middle of the page. Thank you. And we can see that he sets out there the components of the tested system, yes?
Yes, yeah.
And the outer cladding that's used in the test is identified as Sotec 1.5mm aluminium cassette rain screen cladding. You see that?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
And you can see that the insulation, you see, it's halfway down the list, K15 100mm new technology. Yes?
Yes, I can see that, yes.
Yes. Did you spot the fact, or did you know the fact that what was being used in this test was new technology?
Until the inquiry had got the answers from Mr. Meredith and others, I wasn't aware of what new technology was. No.
No discussion at all at the time about what K15 was going up on this test?
No, none at all.
And if we go further down page 2, we can see that towards the end of that page, Mr. Meredith has recorded the heading result, and then he sets out some comments under it. And he says, by 17 minutes, the top fire barrier had breached and the raging inferno moved up to the top thermocouples and pushed them past 600 degrees, thus failing the simple criteria of BR135. You see that?
I do, yes.
And if you go to the top of the next page, please, page 3, you can see that he says the phenolic was burning on its own steam and the BRE had to extinguish the test early because it was endangering setting fire to the laboratory. Is that a fair description of what you saw at the test?
I agree with the fact that it was burning under its own steam. I don't think it was necessarily endangering the lab, but it was never in a position where it was going to pass. So the decision was to terminate.
Right. Who took that decision?
I think that was taken by me.
Right. And moving down page 3, there's a section which starts comments. It's not in bold. You'll have to go down a little bit further on the screen. But there it is, about a third of the way down the screen in front of you. It says comments from the BRE. Do you see that?
I can, yes.
And it starts with the official line. It's a system failure. No individual component can be solely held responsible for the failure. However, unofficial comments, it was apparent that the insulation was fully involved in the test. Surface spread of flame is apparent, and the core continued to burn when the flame source had been extinguished. They stated that they did not remember the product performing like that last time. Now, first question on that is, whose comments were those?
I can't recall, but that may have come from Sarah Colwell. I may have commented on how badly it had burned over the surface, but I can't remember directly who said what. Looking at unofficial comments, which I've just read to you, do you remember who those came from? I don't know why he's differentiated comment, official and unofficial. There's no such thing. But I would say again, probably Sarah Colwell, Tony Baker may have made a comment. Having seen some of the other tests, I may have made a comment. Did you have any discussions yourself with Mr. Meredith after or during this test? Not that I'm aware of specifically, no, other than sort of general chit chat, maybe, I think. Well, we've heard some general chit chat before. During the general chit chat, did you say any words to him along the lines of, or with the gist of the words we see
after unofficial comments in that paragraph?
I did actually watch the video back the other day, and one of the things that was unusual with that test is it burnt round the corner, which was unusual. So we may have pointed that out to him, but I can't recall any direct conversations on that test specifically. No.
You can't recall any conversations. My question was a bit more precise, I think. Did you say any words to Mr. Meredith along the lines of what is said in the paragraph that starts, however, unofficial comments?
I don't recall saying them, no.
You don't recall, but you can't rule it out, can you?
I can't rule it out, no, but I don't recall saying them.
Now he says official line, unofficial comments. You said there's no such thing as official and unofficial comments. Clearly he's got that from somewhere. Can you explain why Mr. Meredith would have thought that he was being given an official line and an unofficial line?
I think that seemed to be a way, from what I've gathered, of either he seemed to compartmentalize things.
Right. I mean, did you have an aside, an offline, a quiet one-to-one chat with him along the lines of the unofficial comments?
No, that's not what we did at BRE. No.
Why would the official comment, or I mean, disregard the fact that it's official, but why would the comment there, it's a system failure, no individual component can be solely held responsible for the failure? What was the point of the test, if not to identify where the failure in the system was?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't know why he's differentiated that, because, as you say, it is a system test. Yes, you can't separate out one individual item in that regard.
In the unofficial comments, you can see in the last sentence that he's recorded that BRE stated that they did not remember the product performing like that last time. Was there a discussion about the performance of the product last time, whatever product that was?
I can't specifically recall, no.
Assuming that this was K15, do you not remember any discussion about the comparison between how K15 performed in this test, burning under its own steam, and how it had performed under any earlier test?
No, because in reality, this was what, did you say this was 2008, I think, did you say? The tests themselves, to a certain extent, were treated as individual tests. I think from looking at the video, it was, as I said earlier, it was probably pointed out how it had gone around the corner, which was quite unusual, and how it had continued to burn. But other than that, I can't remember any other specific conversations.
We've seen, and you've confirmed, that as an observation of the test, the phenolic continued to burn after the fire was extinguished. Do you remember that being worse performance than the performance of the K15, the subject of the May 2005 test, for example?
Side by side, yes, they were completely different, yes.
Did you have any discussion about the comparisons between the May 2005 test and the MetSec December 2007 test with Mr. Meredith?
I can't recall a direct discussion, no.
Now let's look at what Mr. Meredith said in his evidence, please. It's day 75, page 160 to page 161. Day 75, page 160, and I'd like to pick it up with you, please, at line 15. Mr. Meredith is asked by leading counsel, was anyone at the BRE at this time aware that the product tested on 20th of December 2007 was a different one from the product that had been tested in 2005? And Mr. Meredith's answer was, I think I might have discussed this with Phil Clark, because I was looking to see, his opinion on what he thought, really, and I needed to glean as much information from him as possible. I was quite open with him. Right, when you say I might have discussed it, how sure are you that you did discuss it? And then there's a pause, and then if we go to the next page, He says, I'm sure I told him something about our new technology and our ovens along the way. Okay, yeah, question. Other than Phil Clark, was there anyone else at the BRE that you remember discussing or informing of that? And then he gives his answer. He clearly records a conversation with you about the subject matter he's being asked about, and you can see his answer. Does his recollection accord with your recollection, Mr. Clark?
The only thing he ever said was he had changed or got new ovens, but that was the only thing he ever said to me. I don't know the process that they go through, and to me it didn't make any sense as to what it, or I had no understanding of what the implication was.
Was it right that he was looking to you for what you thought about the test?
I don't think so, no.
Are you sure there was no discussion about the differences in performance between the 2005 test and the 2007 test?
I think there was something was said about how it was burning over the whole surface, but that's about all I can ever recall. Nothing else more than that.
And did Mr. Meredith tell you that the product tested in December 2007 was a different product from the one that had been tested in May 2005?
No, never, no.
Looking on at day 76 of his evidence, can we please go to that? Day 76, page 169. And I want to pick it up at line 12. Line 12, I want to ask you, by this time, had Kingspan discussed with anyone else at the BRE the differences between the sold product and the tested product? I think you said yesterday that Phil Clark was aware that you were trying out different products. Is that right? Answer, I was talking to Phil about, that's why we were making improvements to the material. That's why I was asking for his candid answers, his on and off record comments with regards to what he thought of the product. Was he aware that what you tested in 2005 was not what you were selling after that? I think he was. I noticed he was. I think he might have spotted the facing was different, and I might have confirmed that to him as well. And then question, was there anyone, sorry, essentially to the untrained eye, you know, it's a pink foam with a foil facing. It's not going to be, nobody else is going to notice it's any different. It's only within Kingspan formulation that the differences are apparent. Did you discuss that with anyone else at the BRE at any time, those differences? The BRE would certify our ISO 9000, so they were coming into the company 4 times a year to look at our formulations. However, I don't think we discussed it directly with regards to the K15, no. My question is, do you remember any conversation at any stage with Mr. Meredith about changes to the K15 product before and after 2006?
No, I don't, no.
To the foil facer of the product or to the composition of the phenolic foam itself?
No. The only thing I ever remember was one day he asked me to retain a piece to be sent up to one of the other departments of the lab, and that was the only thing he'd ever said. Because I know occasionally they would do some comparative testing for them, but that was all he ever said.
Right. Is this just a difference of recollection, or are you positively denying the conversation along the lines that he recalls?
I'm denying it.
Right. Are you saying he's making it up, or he's just misrecollecting?
I think he's misrecollecting. The only thing I've said earlier is that he mentioned they were changing the oven to do something with drying times, but that's the only thing he ever said to me.
Did you yourself spot the fact that the facer of the product was now different?
No.
You didn't notice at the time of the 20th of December 2007 test that the facer was now perforated?
No, because the
test perforated in the 2005 test.
No, sorry. So, the tests 2005 and this MetTech one would be treated as wholly separate tests. There would be no comparison between the two tests, and there would be no way that I would have known that, no.
Well, you say they're wholly separate tests and no comparison between the two tests. That would only be the case if, in fact, you knew that the product was different. If the product you thought was the same product, then the tests were comparable, weren't they? At least to some degree.
Yes, but BRE doesn't go out of their way to say you did a test in 2005, you've done a test now. How do they compare? That wasn't how it worked.
No, but given that you could see how the you could see how the performance was different. I take it that there was was there any observation about whether or not? Well, let me ask it this way: did you investigate why it was that the product K15 was burning so much worse during this test than in the 2005 test?
No, I didn't know.
Why is that?
It wasn't my job to do that.
Now, you see that Mr. Meredith told us that he was asking for your on and off record comments, as we've seen, day 76, page 169, and I showed you that. Do you accept that?
I don't ever remember having any conversation about on or off the record comments at all, no.
Right. Let's go to KIN 403693. And this is an email of the 9th of January 2008. It's the second email down on the screen you can see, from Ivan Meredith to Sarah Colwell and you. Subject, help, exclamation mark, test possibility, indicative idea, quick thoughts needed, thanks. You see that? And he opens the email by saying, further to yesterday's viewing of the carnage, could you please send the DVD to the address below as soon as possible? As you can imagine, there are many senior persons in KI wishing to view it. Now, did you understand that to be a reference to the viewing of the recording of the test carried out on the 20th of December?
Are you okay if I carry on reading, because I don't recall this email?
Right, yes, of course. You can see that he covers.
Right, okay, yeah. Sorry. I think you had a question, sorry.
Well, he covers a lot of topics. My only question to you was, is this a reference to the viewing of the recording, DVD, of the test carried out on the 20th of December 2007?
Given that was probably just before we closed down, and I probably expect it would be, yes, yeah, we wouldn't have probably tested by the 9th of January, I doubt.
Yes. Now, Mr. Meredith has described the viewing as carnage. That's his word. Would you agree with the sense of that?
Yes, yes.
And the subject of the type of the email, as I've showed you, is help, test possibility, indicative idea, quick thoughts needed, thanks. Did you note that that was the title of the email when you received it?
I don't, there's nothing in here that sparks my memory. It may have been that I read it quickly, and because it was primarily to Sarah, I didn't deal with it in that regard, because there's other things to do with possibility of doing SBIs, which was outside my remit.
Right. Well, you clearly read the text because you spotted that it was about SBIs.
No, I've seen it here straight in front of me. The other possibility to do SBI is just in that line. Yes,
I see. But I mean, I'm assuming that you read it when you received this email. Let's go on to the next paragraph. He says, having spoke to John, do you see that? Second
yes.
paragraph. Having spoke to John, he's still keen to work with us. However, we need to work out where we went wrong. Having cross-referenced with previous tests, it would seem there was more fire spread from the insulant. However, please don't quote me on that. And the cavity barrier may have failed slightly. Your off-the-record and on-the-record comments may prove helpful. So you could see from this email that he was saying that you'd made off the record and on the record comments. Yes?
Just his terminology. I don't know why he keeps using that. There's no such thing.
We'll come back to that in a moment. Before we come to those I'm going to ask you about, he says in the line before, there was more fire spread from the insulant, comparing it with earlier tests. Do you agree?
Yes, it was. It spread across the whole of the face. Yes.
And then let's go to the last two paragraphs of his email on this page. It finishes on the second page, but let's just go to the last two paragraphs on page 1. He said,
"Before you move on, can I just point something out? Actually,
of course.
I think as it is at the moment, where there's the paragraph that says, as there are several tests upcoming, it said it's important to get to the bottom of this. We've just installed new ovens at Pembridge, so the curing process is greatly improved." That, I think, was the only thing he had ever said to me in terms of my understanding about them installing new ovens. That's the only thing I can recall.
So the ovens point was first made in this email, but not at the test itself.
I think so, yes, potentially, yes. And the only thing he ever said was it was to do with the curing times. And as I don't know the process and how it's made, it didn't mean anything to me.
And then if we look at the penultimate paragraph on page 1, please, together, he says this: in your opinions, would it be possible to quickly write a couple of bullets as to your official opinion in respect of the failure? Now, his opinion, his reference to your opinions there is clearly an opinion from each of you and Sarah Colwell, yes?
Yes, I would say, where you said your opinions, yes.
Yes, so you were clearly being asked, as you understood it at the time, for your own opinion by way of a couple of bullet points as to your official opinion in respect of the failure. Is that right?
Reading it that way, I would say that's probably what he was after, yes.
Yes. And did you understand by that that he also thought that there was an unofficial opinion?
This is his terminology. There's no such thing as unofficial.
And going back to where we were a moment ago in the second paragraph in the last sentence, he says, your off-the-record and on-the-record comments may prove helpful. Now, it's clear from this as a document that he has clearly got the idea that the BRE either had made or would make off-the-record and on-the-record comments separately, yes?
That's his perception, but that's not what BRE does now.
No. First of all, how do you think he came by the understanding that the BRE might give off the record and on the record comments?
I don't know. I think knowing either the way I did, he sort of compartmentalized things in sort of certain ways without that actually being what was said. It may be that the way he reported it back meant that he could say it in one way or the other, but in terms of anything that was said between Sarah or him would be official.
Now, we've seen a response to this email. Did you ever write to him and say, by way of response, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Meredith, but we don't do off the record and on the record comments?
I don't ever recall answering this email, and I think Sarah Colwell would have done. Giving any comments on performance was out of my remit, so I wouldn't have answered that question.
Did you see any email from Sarah Colwell in which she corrected his perception that the BRE was prepared to give off the record and on the record comments?
I've never seen an email like that, no.
Why didn't you correct his misapprehension as to what the BRE were and were not prepared to do in this respect?
Because at the time that wasn't my role to do that.
Well, you're being told here by a client for your off-the-record and on-the-record comments and your opinions in respect of these matters. He's actually asked you for that. It wasn't the most obvious thing to do immediately to go back to him and say, I'm terribly sorry, Ivor, that's not something we can do.
That necessarily wouldn't come from me. That it was addressed to Sarah, who was a senior member of staff in the organisation, and it's I wouldn't ever send something out without putting it past her or allowing her to clear that up. It was addressed to her, and what you need to understand is that at this time, Ivor had a tendency to use a scattergun effect in terms of who he sent emails to. It's this thing about let's CC in whoever we think is pertinent, and he always seemed to just copy me into stuff, whether it was relevant to me or not.
You see, we've seen no response from you correcting him about his apprehension as to what the BRE were prepared to do in this respect, and we've seen no response from Sarah Colwell either to that effect. I'm about to suggest to you, Mr. Clark, that Mr. Meredith's apprehension, his understanding about the BRE's willingness to give on the record and off the record official and unofficial views was justified, because otherwise he would have corrected it.
As I say, I wasn't in a position there to correct clients in that regard. He addressed the email to Sarah Colwell, who is a senior member of staff, and I would not write things. And I think you've seen in another email in my my statement that I would refer things to Sarah. So the fact he copied her in, addressed it directly to her, meant that I thought she would answer that question. It wasn't me to correct him. My job to correct him in that way.
Did you have a conversation with Sarah Colwell about his request for opinions from both of you, each of you, as to your official as opposed to unofficial comments, and say to her that he should be corrected?
Not that I recall, no. It wasn't in at that time, it wasn't in my remit to ask those type of questions.
Well,
and it never has really.
Let's look at the last paragraph. He says, back to the email, please, bottom of page 1. He says there, to come back up again, KIN 403693, page 1, last paragraph. As we are getting some pressure from a certain manufacturer questioning the performance of our product, I need to be confident that the BRE would not write it was the fault of the flame spread on the insulant. From our discussions, I understand the official statement would be system failure. I will not quote you on this. I just need to be confident that when we say the material has the ability to pass, however, whether it does or does not can boil down to the system. And then over the page, your help much appreciated. So you were clearly being asked, weren't you, for an unofficial line from you to him to give him the assurance that even though there might be a system failure officially, he wanted to know whether in fact K15 could still pass.
From reading that paragraph, then that seems to be the way he was angling it, yes. But knowing Sarah as long as I have, she would never have written an email which would confirm what he had requested.
What was the upshot of his request for opinions along these lines?
I have absolutely no idea.
Let's move to April 2008. Another test was carried out to BSA 414 Part 2 in early April 2008 on a system incorporating K15, wasn't it?
Can you remind me which test that was?
Yes, it was the one, certainly. Do you remember it? It was the one in conjunction with SOTEC and METSEC again.
Oh, right, another K15, sorry, with SOTEC. Yes. I understand there was, yes.
Now, do you have any records of it, or have you seen any BRE records of that test?
I think as a consequence of something from the inquiry, I was issued some DVDs about a month ago, maybe. And I think on there it had the second test on it.
Let's look at Ivor Meredith's report about it, which is a KIN 403698.
Can I just clarify something, actually? When this program was put together, I think it was, as you say, it was a joint collaboration between Kingspan, METSEC and SOTEC. So SOTEC, to my mind, were the client in the job. I think Ivor had agreed that SOTEC would part fund the tests. And then I think after, if I recall correctly, after the first test failure, he agreed with John to do the second test. So it was outside the scope of the original test, I think.
Can we go to Ivor Meredith's report on this test, which is at KIN 403698? This is an internal Kingspan report, which I don't expect you to have seen, dated the 4th of April 2008. If you have seen it, let me know. But if we go to the second bullet point on page 1, we can see what Mr. Meredith records there. And he says this: the second attempt met SOTEC Cooltherm failed the BS 8414 Part 2 test by 160 seconds. To meet BR 135, the top level thermocouples must not exceed 600 degrees for 15 minutes following the first level thermocouples exceeding 200 degrees. I held a lengthy post-test meeting with Just Kingspan and the senior fire technicians, S. Colwell, N. MacDonald and P. Clark, to ascertain whether a 160-second improvement is possible. See that?
I do see that, yes.
Were you present at this test?
I think I was present at the test, but I don't recall a meeting. I can't ever recall having a meeting with Norman MacDonald.
So you were present at the test?
Sorry, I missed that.
I just asked you whether you were present at the test.
I was present at the test, yes.
Was Sarah Colwell present at the test?
I can't recall directly, no.
Is N. MacDonald Norman MacDonald?
No, that is Norman MacDonald, yes.
What's his role?
I think at the time he would undertake assessments of building products to do with fire resistance, what they call XAP, extension of application assessments and that type of thing. I think he primarily worked for LPCB.
I see. Now, as you can see, I think you've already jumped to it, but let me put it to you. Mr. Meredith records the fact that he held a lengthy post-test meeting with Just Kingspan and the senior fire technicians, and identifies you there, P. Clark. At least I'm assuming it's you.
Yes, yes.
There was another P. Clark there. Who could have been relevant to this test?
No.
No. Do you agree that such a meeting took place?
I don't recall it. As I say, I can not ever recall having a meeting with Norman MacDonald present.
Do you deny that a meeting with Mr. Meredith took place after this test in April 8?
I can't deny it, but I don't recall it.
Can you explain why this wasn't referred to in your witness statement?
Because I don't ever recall having that meeting.
Right. Now, if that, as Mr. Meredith has recorded here, if it's correct that there was a lengthy post-test meeting to ascertain whether a 160-second improvement is possible, that would have been the giving advice by the BRE to a manufacturer as to how to improve the tested system. Do you agree?
I would agree, yes. Yeah, if what he said is correct, I would agree, yes.
Can we then turn to March 2014, a later Kingspan test, some years on, and you deal with this in your witness statement at paragraph 208 of page 51. Can we please go there? And the question you're answering is question 9A. Who was present during this test, both from the BRE and from the test sponsor? And just to help you a little bit more, this is the test done on the 19th of March 2014 using rain screen comprising Trespa HPL. Remember that?
I think there were two. Is this the one with the black face or the red face? I remember it. Yes, yes.
We can go back to the earlier part of the. We can go to paragraph 206. just to give you the context for this. If we look at question 9, test report 293940, dated 26th of June, and 206, you say this test, which took place on 19th March 2014, with Kingspan as the test sponsor, involved a Trespa rain screen and Kingspan K15 insulation material.
Yes, I've got a feeling this was the one that was disputed, yes.
Right. Now let's go to BRE 403531, please. Excuse me. Here's an email from Ivor Meredith to you and Stephen Howard, dated the 20th of March 2014, so the day after the test. Yes.
Yes.
And he starts, "Gents, I trust all is well." And he asks for when the thermocouple data will be available. And then if you go down to the last line of the 4th paragraph of Mr. Meredith's email, he says, "Phil, I will get Aztec in on Monday to start stripping out. I would like to be there. I would like to be there to witness what was going on behind the cladding, although I assume you will be taking lots of pictures of that area. Also, can you make any unofficial comments with regards to the falling debris this time compared to the previous test? Did you provide any comments with regards to the falling debris this time in comparison to the previous test?"
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Again, can you help us as to how it had come about that Mr. Meredith was still in 2014 under the impression that he could ask you for unofficial comments comparing one test with an earlier one?
No, it's this, he has this recurring thing in his head. He had some very strange ideas sometimes. No, I can't.
Yes, it was recurring, maybe because you never corrected him. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, you look at it that way. But why would I correct him? I'm there on behalf of BRE, and we don't give unofficial comments.
That's not something that we've ever seen you say to him, though, in response to these recurring requests.
It's not my job to correct him. The email here is CC'd in, copied directly to Stephen Howard, who is a senior member of staff, and to Stephen Manchester, who is a senior member of staff, all many grades above me, and none of them have corrected it. And if they don't deem it fit to correct him, then it's outside the remit of my job to correct him.
Mr. Clark, this paragraph is addressed specifically to you. That's why it starts with the word Phil.
Yes. That's particular paragraph, but if Mr. Howard and Mr. Manchester read this, they were within their right to say, sorry, Mr. Howard, you cannot ask Phil Clark for these unofficial comments because no such things exist, if that's the way you wanted it. And it's not my place to say to a client, you don't get unofficial comments.
It is when you're being asked for them, isn't it?
Potentially in hindsight, yes, but
did you have a conversation with Mr. Howard or Mr. Manchester about going back to Mr. Meredith and putting him right at last?
Not I recall, no.
No. I'm going to suggest to you that these recurring requests for unofficial comments, unofficial comparisons between these tests and previous tests recurred precisely because they were the kinds of comments you kept giving him. And he wouldn't have kept asking unless you had kept giving them.
We never spoke to Ivor in that way. I don't understand why he keeps asking them. It's just his terminology, I think.
Why did you or anybody else that we've seen never explain to Mr. Meredith that it would be inappropriate for the BRE to provide any unofficial comments?
Because as I've already explained, I don't know why anybody else has never done that. as I explained to you, given the role I had, it wasn't my role to correct him in that regard.
Did Mr. Howard have anything to say about this request from Kingspan for unofficial comments?
I've never had a conversation with him along that lines, no.
So, to your way of thinking, he got this email. Did it not surprise you that he didn't pick up the phone to you or send you an email and say, oh, what's all this about unofficial comments?
Stephen Howard, you mean?
Yes, Stephen Howard.
That wasn't the way Steve worked. Steve had quite a good relationship with Kingspan. He may have spoke to him directly about it, but it didn't surprise me that he didn't reply necessarily, no.
Given the subject matter of the unofficial comments, why would Steve Manchester or Stephen Howard have thought that this was their business? You ran the test. It was your business to make whatever. It was you would have known what comparison could be made between these tests. They would surely just have left it to you to respond to Mr. Meredith, particularly since he had addressed this comment specifically to you. Isn't that right?
No, because I was the tester, and you alluded earlier that some of the comments I made, you perceive them to be as giving consultancy, and in this regard, I would comply. I would say that potentially was giving them consultancy, and it wasn't in my remit. I was only doing the testing.
It's right, isn't it, that this tested system couldn't be classified to BR135, could it?
Yeah, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it was disputed, yes, and they BRE refused to classify it. Yeah, that's correct.
You covered that at paragraph 237 of your statement. Is that right? We can see that.
If it's the red tresper, then yes.
Go to page 58, just to be clear. You say, my recollection, which is supported by my review of the test video footage, is that I informed the test sponsor of the potential for flaming above the test facility having occurred at 24 minutes 11 seconds due to excessive flaming over the surface of the wing wall. However, this flaming subsequently reduced as a note at 24 minutes 21 seconds records flames over the surface of the panels die back. Now, I would like to take you through some of the footage of that test, but given the hour, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to be able to complete that or the other questions I have for Mr. Clark tonight. I do not have very far to go with him, probably an hour or an hour and a half more, but depending on how we go with the video footage.
Right. Well, would it be better to do that tomorrow?
You would, if that's convenient to you and to Mr. Clark.
Yes. And would it be safe to tell Mr. Clark that he ought to be free by lunchtime tomorrow?
Yes, I anticipate so. It will depend, I suspect, upon what further questions we find for him overnight. But
well, of course, yeah.
The normal run of these things, I doubt that will take up too much time. So I would have thought so, yes.
Well, there you are, Mr. Clark. That's the best indication I'm afraid we can give you.
No, that's fine, sir. I'm here at your disposal.
Well, that's very good. Thank you very much. Well, we'll call a halt to the day at that point. Please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence over the break. And we'll look forward to seeing you at 10 o'clock tomorrow, please.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good. Thank you.
Bye.
10 o'clock tomorrow then, please.